The sky was darkening over Earth as a storm of uncertainty brewed. It had been days since the first report came in from the galaxy. A fleet of warships from the NIGMA Empire was heading directly toward Earth. They were massive, towering ships capable of wiping out entire civilizations with the flick of a switch. The news spread like wildfire, panic and fear gripping every corner of the world. People had been glued to their screens, watching the headlines flash over and over again. NIGMA Empire heading to Earth. Humanity faces extinction. Governments around the world had tried to prepare, but no one knew how to stop an empire with such destructive power. Inside the United Earth Command Center, the air was thick with tension. The leaders of Earth, President Allen, General Warson, and Commander Elise stood together in front of a massive holographic screen, displaying the approaching NIGMA fleet. They were running out of time. The NIGMA were not just conquerors. They were annihilators. No one had ever resisted them for long, and their past conquests were proof of their brutality. The idea that Earth, a young planet in the grand scale of the galaxy, could stand against them was laughable. But humanity had one thing the NIGMA didn't expect: heart. "We don't have much time left," President Allen said, his voice tight with urgency. His face, usually calm, was now drawn with worry. "The NIGMA will arrive within the next 48 hours. We need a solution, and we need it fast." "We've prepared the best we can," General Warson responded, his voice like gravel. "But we can't face them in open combat. Their fleet is too strong. The only thing we can do is send them a message, a warning. Let them know that we will fight, that we won't go down without a struggle." Commander Elise, standing at the far end of the room, looked up from the screen, her eyes sharp and calculating. "A warning isn't enough. We need to make them understand that Earth is not a planet that can simply destroy without consequence. We need to show them we're not afraid." The three of them knew that whatever happened next, Earth had to act quickly. The NIGMA had already destroyed countless planets in their path, and Earth was just another prize in their eyes. But the humans weren't ready to simply bow down. Elise had always believed that there was something different about humanity, something that gave them strength in the face of overwhelming odds. She believed in the resilience of the human spirit. "Prepare the message," she said, her voice firm. "We'll send a final communication, a message that will make them understand we will never surrender." As the hours passed, the tension only grew. The Earth military worked tirelessly, assembling their final defense plan, trying to find any advantage they could. But deep down, they all knew that their resources were limited. Earth's technology, while advanced, was no match for the NIGMA's superior weaponry. Their only hope was to delay the inevitable, to buy enough time for the rest of humanity to prepare. The final message was ready. It was broadcast from the heart of the United Earth Command Center, directed toward the NIGMA fleet, which was now only hours away. The room fell into a tense silence as the words of the final warning were typed out and displayed on the screen for all to see. President Allen's voice echoed through the room, steady but resolute. "To the NIGMA Empire, this is Earth, the planet you've chosen to invade. We are issuing a final warning. Turn back now, and you will be allowed to league in peace. Continue on your path, and you will face consequences unlike anything you've ever seen before. We may not have the might to defeat you, but we will fight, and we will make sure you regret underestimating us. The choice is yours. You can leave, or you can face the consequences." There was no room for doubt in those words. The message was clear. Earth was ready to fight. They were ready to stand, no matter the cost. The communication ended, and the room fell into a deathly quiet. Everyone knew this was their last chance. The NIGMA had no reason to listen to a small, unassuming planet like Earth, but they couldn't let fear paralyze them. If Earth was to fall, it would fall fighting. As the transmission ended, Commander Elise turned away from the screen, her thoughts racing. She knew the NIGMA would likely disregard the warning, seeing it as a bluff. They had destroyed entire civilizations before without a second thought. But she also knew that humanity could never just give in. They had to stand tall, even if that meant fighting a battle they had no chance of winning. "We've done everything we can," General Warson said quietly. "Now, we wait." The hours seemed to stretch on forever. The world held its breath as the NIGMA fleet grew closer. The atmosphere was thick with dread, but also with something else: determination. People across the globe watched the sky, knowing that the fate of humanity rested on the choices made in the coming hours. Then, finally, the NIGMA responded. The broadcast came across all channels, cutting through the silence like a blade. Lord Azoth, the ruthless warlord leading the NIGMA fleet, appeared on every screen. His face was cold, his eyes filled with disdain. The image of him was larger than life, a being of immense power, and his words were like ice. "To the humans of Earth, you are insignificant. We have seen your message. We have heard your threats. But you are nothing. Your world, your people, your very existence will be erased. Your message is a joke, a desperate cry from a dying species. We do not negotiate. We conquer. We destroy. Prepare yourselves for annihilation." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The leaders in the command center exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "We knew they wouldn't listen," President Allen said, his voice resigned. "But we had to try." Commander Elise stepped forward, her eyes burning with fury and resolve. "They're wrong about us. They think we're weak. They think they can crush us. But we will show them. We will fight with everything we have. We will make them regret this." The reality of the situation sank in. The NIGMA had issued their verdict. Earth's time had run out. But in that moment, something shifted in Alyssa's mind. She was no longer just a commander. She was the leader of a world that was about to face its darkest hour. And no matter how impossible the odds, humanity would not be extinguished without a fight. The countdown had begun. The fate of Earth was in their hands now. And there was no turning back. The night sky over Earth was filled with tension. In the aftermath of the NIGMA's brutal dismissal of Earth's final warning, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Across the world, every nation prepared for the worst, though none of them were truly ready for the unimaginable force they were about to face. Earth's leaders gathered once again at the United Earth Command Center, staring at a holographic display of the NIGMA fleet closing in, their warships shining like dark monoliths against the backdrop of space. The countdown was ticking, less than 12 hours until the NIGMA would arrive. Commander Elise stood before the room of military officials and strategists, her eyes hardened with determination. She had always known that humanity's greatest strength was their ability to fight back when pushed to the brink. But facing the NIGMA, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility pressing on her. Earth had sent out its message, and the enemy had laughed. Now, there was no going back. They were on the cusp of extinction or survival. "We don't have time to waste," Elise said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We need to mobilize every resource we have. We cannot afford to waste a single moment." General Warson, standing to her left, nodded gravely. "Our best defenses are in place, but we need to be prepared for the fact that the NIGMA might overpower us in the initial strike. We've trained for this, but their technology, it's on another level. We don't have the firepower to match them." "I know," Elise replied, turning to the display. "But we've got something they don't have. We've got human ingenuity. We've got the will to survive." As the room fell into tense silence, President Allen stepped forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "We've spent years building up the defense grid, but that won't be enough against the NIGMA's ships. We need something that can level the playing field. We need a game changer." Ellis's eyes flicked to the corner of the room, where a small team of scientists and engineers had been working on a classified project for months. It was humanity's last hope. A new experimental weapon, one they believed could give them an edge against the overwhelming NIGMA force. The weapon was designed to disable enemy technology, a disruptor that could short-circuit NIGMA warships and temporarily neutralize their systems. The problem was, the weapon had never been tested in real combat, and no one knew if it would even work. But it was their only shot. "The prototype is ready," Commander Elise said, turning to the engineers. "Is it operational?" One of the scientists, a young woman named Dr. Layla Grant, nodded, though there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "It's ready, Commander, but there are risks. The weapon could either work flawlessly, or it could backfire and cause massive collateral damage to Earth's own systems. We're talking about a full-scale EMP that will disrupt every electronic device within range. Better to take a chance than sit and wait for them to destroy us," Elise responded. She knew the risks, but the NIGMA had given them no choice. As the final preparations were made, the urgency grew. Military units were deployed across the globe, preparing for the worst-case scenario. Earth's defenses were organized into 3 primary phases: initial defense against the NIGMA's first wave, the launch of the EMP disruptor, and a final counterattack if they managed to hold on long enough. But the question remained, how long could Earth last? With the NIGMA fleet now just hours away, Earth's best and brightest minds worked tirelessly to prepare for the coming storm. The final message from Lord Izoth still echoed in Elise's mind. His words were clear. Earth was a mere blip in the galaxy, unworthy of survival. The NIGMA had taken planets before and would take Earth without hesitation. Their overconfidence was dangerous, but it also presented an opening. "We've underestimated humanity before," Elise muttered to herself. She had studied the NIGMA for years, and every inch of her was ready for what was coming. This time, they'll see just how wrong they are. Hours passed, and the world watched in collective anticipation. Earth's defense systems, though far from perfect, had been activated, but there was no doubt that the first few moments of the invasion would be the most critical. As the NIGMA warships entered Earth's orbit, their ships spread like a dark cloud across the sky. Each ship was a towering giant, bristling with weapons and shields. The entire world held its breath. As the first NIGMA ship opened fire, a brilliant flash of light filled the sky. Explosions rocked major cities as the NIGMA unleashed their might, devastating everything in their path. Earth's defense systems retaliated, but the NIGMA were relentless. The power of their assault was overwhelming, and Earth's defenses were struggling to keep up. On the ground, chaos erupted. Airstrikes, explosions, and the sounds of sirens filled the air as soldiers and civilians alike rushed to shelters. The NIGMA had come for Earth, and they weren't pulling any punches. Commander Elise stood at the heart of the United Earth Command Center, watching as the destruction unfolded on the screen before her. The first wave of NIGMA ships had already caused significant damage, and now the human forces had to act quickly or risk losing everything. She had made the decision to deploy the EMP weapon, but there was one problem. The weapon could only be activated from a remote location, far outside the safety of Earth's borders. The mission was clear. A small, elite team would have to infiltrate NIGMA's defenses, find the coordinates, and activate the weapon. The team would face certain danger, but it was the only option. "I'll lead the mission," Elise said, stepping forward. "Commander, you're needed here," General Warson protested. "I'm needed everywhere," Elise replied firmly. "If we don't use the EMP, we won't survive the next wave." With a determined look, Elise turned to her team, the brave soldiers who had volunteered to fight alongside her. Together, they boarded a transport ship, making their way toward the heart of NIGMA territory. The mission was dangerous, and the odds were slim, but they had no other choice. They were humanity's last line of defense. As they soared through the chaos of war, Elise couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. They had done the impossible before, and they would do it again. Humanity would fight until the very end. And if they had to, they would die for their world. The transport ship raced through space, its engines humming with urgency as it hurtled toward the heart of the NIGMA-controlled sector. Commander Elise sat at the front, her eyes fixed on the holographic screen that showed the progress of their mission. Behind her, the rest of her team prepared for what was sure to be a suicide mission. They were humanity's last chance to deploy the EMP disruptor and potentially turn the tide against the overwhelming NIGMA fleet. There was no guarantee it would work, but it was the only hope they had. The NIGMA's warships loomed larger on their monitors as they neared the enemy fleet, their dark, imposing shapes stretching across the sky like giants. The weight of the mission pressed on every member of the team, but no one faltered. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's future. "Commander, we're entering their detection range," said Sergeant Juno, the team's tactical expert. Her voice was steady, though the tension in her posture was visible. "We'll need to move quickly to avoid being spotted. We can't afford to be caught." Elise nodded. She knew the stakes. Every moment they spent in NIGMA space brought them closer to being discovered. The NIGMA's fleet was not just technologically superior. They were ruthless. If the humans were caught, they wouldn't just die. They would be obliterated. "Understood," Elise replied. "We stick to the plan. In and out. Focus on the EMP activation. We've trained for this." The transport ship continued its descent through the darkness of space, weaving in and out of asteroids to avoid the NIGMA's advanced scanning systems. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity as the tension in the ship grew. Their small, sleek vessel was a far cry from the massive warships that patrolled the area. It was fragile, vulnerable, and they were completely alone in enemy territory. "This is it," said Private Daniels, the youngest member of the team. His voice was shaky, betraying his nerves despite his bravado. He had grown up hearing stories of Earth's defenders, but never once did he imagine he would be among them. Now he was staring death in the face, unsure if he would ever return home. Elise turned to him, her eyes soft but determined. "We all know the risks, but we're not backing down. If we fail, Earth falls. If we succeed, we've got a chance. That's all we can ask for." The silence in the ship was deafening as they approached their target, a NIGMA stronghold floating in the void. It was a massive installation, a station that coordinated the entire NIGMA fleet's movements. The EMP disruptor had to be activated at the heart of the station, deep inside enemy territory. The transport ship drifted closer, hidden among the drifting debris, as they entered the final stretch of their journey. It was now or never. They would need to land, infiltrate the facility, and get to the core of the station without being detected. "Steady," Elise murmured to herself, though the words were meant for her team as well. Every instinct told her to turn back. The NIGMA were ruthless, and they would not hesitate to destroy anything in their path. But there was no turning back now. Earth had sent its message. They had issued their warning. Now they were the ones taking the fight to the enemy. The transport ship touched down on the surface of the NIGMA station, hidden in the shadows of a giant asteroid. They had made it this far, but the real challenge was just beginning. The air was thick with tension as Elise gave the order for the team to disembark. "Remember the plan," she said, her voice firm, but carrying an undercurrent of reassurance. "We move fast, we stay silent, and we make it to the EMP core. We have one shot at this." The doors to the transport ship hissed open, and the team swiftly disembarked, their boots crunching against the rocky surface of the NIGMA station. The moonlit shadows of the asteroid created an eerie ambience, but there was no time to be awestruck. They needed to move. Elise led the way, her rifle raised and ready. The NIGMA base was dark, almost eerily quiet, as they moved through the corridors. They passed walls covered in unfamiliar alien symbols, their shapes strange and menacing. The station was a labyrinth, designed to confuse and trap intruders. But Elise and her team had trained for this. They had studied NIGMA technology, their tactics and their design. They were prepared. "We're close," Sergeant Juno whispered as they neared the center of the station. Their comms crackled with static, and the sound of their breathing echoed in their helmets. Every corner could hide a threat, every room a potential danger. But so far, they had managed to remain undetected. Suddenly, a sharp noise rang through the hallway. A door slid open at the far end of the corridor. NIGMA soldiers emerged, their dark, intimidating forms silhouetted against the flickering light. It was a moment of pure instinct, no hesitation. Elise motioned for her team to take cover behind a nearby wall, and they crouched low, weapons at the ready. A quiet, tense moment passed. The NIGMA soldiers walked past them, unaware of the human intruders in their midst. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the air, heavy and foreboding, but they moved on. Elise let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Let's move." The team sprinted toward the control room, where the EMP disruptor would need to be activated. They finally reached the central hub of the station, a large chamber filled with humming consoles and glowing blue lights. The disruptor was set up, ready for activation. But as Elise stepped forward, the alarms blared. The NIGMA had discovered their presence. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder as the station's security systems came online, and NIGMA soldiers began to swarm the area. "It's now or never," Elise shouted, motioning for her team to fall into defensive positions. "Activate the disruptor. We hold them off." With a rush of adrenaline, the EMP disruptor powered up, but it wasn't enough. NIGMA forces were closing in fast, and they were heavily armed. There was no time to think. Elise and her team fought valiantly, their weapons blazing in the chaos. The EMP was their only hope now. If it worked, it would disable the NIGMA fleet's technology, giving Earth a fighting chance. But as the last of the soldiers fell, the station's core began to glow, and the hum of energy reached a deafening crescendo. "Get out! Now!" Elise screamed as the room began to shake. The EMP was activating. In the chaos of the moment, they had one choice left: escape or perish. The room exploded in a burst of light and energy, and the entire station seemed to tremble. It was happening. The EMP had gone off. But the battle was far from over. Earth had sent a message, one that the NIGMA would not ignore. And now, humanity was about to see if their gamble would pay off. The shockwave of the EMP rippled through the NIGMA station with a deafening roar, shaking the very core of the facility. The walls trembled, and the flickering lights overhead blinked out one by one. For a brief moment, there was nothing but a terrifying silence. The NIGMA's warships, once bristling with energy and power, suddenly faltered. Their systems flickered, the aggressive hum of their engines dying down. The once deadly weapons went dormant. The unstoppable NIGMA had been crippled. Elise staggered as the shockwave knocked her off her feet, but she quickly regained her composure. "We did it," she gasped, disbelief mixing with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The EMP had worked. Against all odds, it had worked. Earth's final weapon had gone off, rendering the NIGMA fleet vulnerable. The tables had turned, but there was no time to celebrate. They had mere moments before the NIGMA regained control of their systems. The team moved quickly, gathering their gear and sprinting for the exit. The hallway around them was now chaos. Screams echoed as the NIGMA scrambled to reactivate their systems. The humans were at the heart of their territory, and their survival depended on escaping before they could recover. Elise's mind raced as they moved. The EMP had been a success, but they were not out of danger yet. The NIGMA's reaction would be swift, and the fleet was not easily defeated. They had only disabled their systems temporarily. If they didn't get out now, The NIGMA would retaliate with everything they had. Move, move, move. Elise barked at her team, her voice cutting through the madness. She kept her eyes on the flickering display on her wrist, which showed their exit route. Their transport ship was still waiting on the surface, but it was far away, too far. Suddenly, a heavy thud rang through the station, followed by the unmistakable sound of booted footsteps. The NIGMA had regrouped faster than expected. Their soldiers were closing in. "I'll hold them off," Sergeant Juno shouted, turning to face the oncoming soldiers. She wasn't about to let her team get caught. "No," Elise ordered, grabbing her arm. "We need to stay together." "We don't have a choice," Juno snapped, pulling away. "You'll never make it without me buying you time." She raised her weapon. "Go." The team hesitated for a split second, but there was no time for second-guessing. Elise's heart ached as Juno took her position, positioning herself behind a pillar for cover. The NIGMA soldiers were advancing too quickly, and Juno knew they couldn't afford to wait. "Get to the ship," Juno said through clenched teeth, her voice steady. "Now." Without another word, Elise and the rest of her team turned and sprinted toward the exit. They didn't dare look back. The corridors felt endless as they raced through the station, their every step echoing off the walls. The lights flickered as the EMP's effect slowly wore off, and the distant roar of the NIGMA growing louder with each passing second. There was no time for mistakes. Every moment felt like an eternity. Finally, they reached the transport ship's landing bay. Elise's heart pounded as the door slid open, revealing the transport waiting for them. The ship was their lifeline, but it was also exposed in the middle of the NIGMA station. They could hear the footsteps of the soldiers closing in fast, their heavy breathing and the clanking of their boots reverberating through the halls. "We're not going to make it," Private Daniels muttered, his voice tinged with fear. His legs were already shaking from exhaustion, but there was no room for doubt. "We're not giving up," Elise snapped back. "We fight until we breathe our last breath, if we have to. This is for Earth." The team ran to the ship, barely pausing to climb aboard. The door slammed shut behind them with a metallic clang. The transport engines roared to life, but just as the ship began to lift off, a loud explosion shook the station. The shockwave rattled the transport, and they were sent tumbling into the air. "The station's coming apart," Sergeant Ellis yelled, pulling himself from the floor as the ship's controls flickered in front of him. The EMP had done more than disable the NIGMA systems. It had triggered a catastrophic chain reaction in the station's core. "We need to get out of here now," Elise shouted. The transport ship swerved wildly as the station's structure began to crumble around them. They could feel the impact of the explosions as debris rained down, pieces of the station's outer shell breaking off and floating into space. They had only seconds to spare. The escape route was narrow, and NIGMA warships were already turning their weapons back on, their systems reactivating. "Punch it," Elise ordered. Ellis gripped the controls, his fingers dancing over the buttons. The transport surged forward, narrowly avoiding a blast from a NIGMA warship's cannon as the ship zipped through the wreckage of the station. The view outside was chaos. Pieces of the destroyed station floated in all directions, and several NIGMA ships were in full retreat, trying desperately to recalibrate their systems. "Hang on," Ellis shouted, his face pale as he fought to keep control of the ship. The transport was being hit by debris, and each jolt sent them reeling. The ship veered sharply, and with a burst of speed, they broke through the outer perimeter of the NIGMA station's collapsing shell. As they escaped into open space, the sight behind them was nothing short of apocalyptic. The NIGMA's once formidable stronghold was now in ruins, its fleet scattering into the void as the shockwave of the EMP continued to cripple their systems. "We did it," Private Daniels whispered, his voice barely audible. Elise let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It wasn't over yet. They had survived the initial battle, but the war was far from won. The NIGMA might have lost their advantage for now, but they would regroup. They would retaliate, and humanity would need to be ready. "We fought ourselves some time," Elise said, her voice resolute. "But we're not done yet. We have to take the fight to them. This war is just beginning." As the transport ship shot through space, the team looked out the windows, watching as the NIGMA fleet retreated. They had done the impossible. They had struck a blow that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. But the cost was high, and they knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But for now, humanity had won a battle, and that was enough to keep the spark of hope alive. The NIGMA had underestimated humanity before, and now they would see the true power of a united Earth. As the transport ship drifted further away from the shattered remains of the NIGMA station, the team sat in tense silence, their minds racing with the enormity of what had just happened. They had accomplished the impossible, succeeded in a mission that was deemed suicidal by almost everyone who knew of it. The NIGMA, once seemingly invincible, had been dealt a crippling blow, and the message from Earth had been heard loud and clear. However, for all the victory they felt in that moment, the gravity of the situation was not lost on Elise. The NIGMA were not easily defeated, and although they had disabled much of their fleet, the war was far from over. They had only bought time, not secured peace. The humanity they had fought to protect was still in danger. Elise stood at the front of the transport, staring at the stars outside, lost in thought. Her team sat behind her, each member trying to catch their breath. But the reality of the mission was settling in. The weight of the losses they had sustained, the comrades they had left behind, and the magnitude of the next steps all pressed down on their shoulders. "Commander," Sergeant Ellis's voice broke through the silence. He had come up behind her, his face tired but determined. "We did it. The EMP worked. We crippled the NIGMA. But what's next?" Elise turned to face him, her expression hard. "What's next?" she repeated, almost as if she was testing the question. "We get back to Earth. We report. We plan for what's next. The NIGMA are regrouping. This won't end with one strike. We need to build on this victory." Ellis nodded, though there was still uncertainty in his eyes. "But what if we can't? What if they come back stronger than before?" "They will," Elise said firmly, her voice steely. "But that's why we're going to be ready. We've sent them a message, but now we need to prepare. If we're going to win this war, we need to hit them harder, faster, and more efficiently. We need to make sure this isn't a fluke." Ellis fell silent, understanding the gravity of her words. They had to keep the momentum going. They had to strike before the NIGMA could recover. There was no time to rest, no time for victory laps. The universe was watching, and humanity's fate hung in the balance. The team spent the rest of the journey back to Earth discussing the next steps. The EMP had been a game-changer, but it was not enough on its own. They needed intelligence, more advanced tactics, and a strategy to hit the NIGMA where it hurt the most. Earth had given them one shot, and they had taken it. But now they had to make sure they were prepared for the long haul. By the time they entered Earth's atmosphere, the team had come to a grim but focused realization. The war was just beginning. As the transport descended toward the landing strip, the weight of their mission settled even deeper into their bones. They had made it back, but they had lost so much. Lives had been sacrificed for this moment of success, and they would carry those losses with them into the future. Once they landed, the team disembarked, and as they walked toward the command center, they could see the chaos that had followed in the wake of their mission. Earth had received the transmission. The damage had been done to the NIGMA fleet, and the empire that had once been invincible was now in disarray. The command center buzzed with activity, officers coordinating defense plans, and messages pouring in from various parts of the galaxy. The list was met by General Harker, the man who had authorized the mission. He was waiting near the entrance to the command room, his face a mixture of relief and concern. His first words to Elise were not of praise, but of cold calculation. "You did what we couldn't do for years," General Harker said, his voice steady. "But now the real work begins. The NIGMA are going to fight back harder than ever." Elise nodded, the weight of his words hitting her like a punch to the gut. "We knew that would happen. They'll come for us, but we'll be ready." Harker eyed her closely. "We need to be ready for more than just the NIGMA's retaliation. This war isn't just about defeating them. It's about stopping them from rebuilding. We need to learn everything we can from this victory and figure out where we go from here." Elise agreed, her mind already running through the possibilities. The NIGMA were not a typical enemy. They would not just retreat into the darkness after losing a single battle. They would adapt. They would evolve. And Earth had to be ready for the next stage. "Understood," she said quietly. "We'll need intel, and we need to start building alliances, more than just Earth. We need the rest of the galaxy on our side if we're going to have any chance of defeating them for good." General Harker nodded. "We're already in the process of reaching out to other factions. The galaxy is vast, but we've got to work fast. The NIGMA are ruthless, and they've got resources we can't even begin to imagine." As they entered the command center, Elise couldn't help but think of the soldiers they had lost, the friends who had fought and died in the depths of the NIGMA stronghold. She would honor their memory by pushing forward, by ensuring their sacrifice wasn't in vain. The battle had only just begun, and she would make sure humanity was ready for the fight. In the coming days, Elise and her team would debrief with military command, offer insights into the NIGMA's technology and tactics, and begin planning humanity's next move. The war would not be won with a single battle, and the NIGMA would come back stronger than before, but Earth had sent a message. They had taken a stand, and humanity would fight back, not as a fractured species, but as one united front. The NIGMA had underestimated Earth once. They would not make that mistake again. As the command center buzzed with activity, Elise stood in the center of it all, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be trifled with. The NIGMA had thought they were unstoppable, but now they knew the truth. Earth had a voice in the galaxy, and they were ready to make it heard.